Hello, everyone, and welcome to Anatomy of an Adaptation. This is a podcast that aims to compare and contrast classic novels with their cinematic adaptations. I'm your host, Nicolo Grasso, and I am joined once again, so happy, by the editor in chief of clapperltd.co.uk, Jak-Luke Sharp. How are you doing, Jack? So happy to have you on board.
I'm brilliant. It's nice to be back. It feels like it's been. I bet it's close to a year. I bet it's maybe last September, so we're about 9 months.
Yeah.
What last episode we did Psycho, didn't we? Really good episode. I love these things. It makes me read, makes me get out there. I'm happy. I listen to a lot of the podcasts that you do, but I need to read more. So I'm really happy to be back. And this is an interesting episode. Let's go, because I'm a big admirer of the film. I've never read the source material. Had no real inkling what the source material was like. And they're very chalk and cheese, so this is going to be a brilliant episode. But thank you very much for inviting me. Every moment to spend with you, Nick, it's always a pleasure. You know that anyway. You know I love you to pieces. So
The pleasure is all mine.
that butted him up anyway. So let's get into it.
Yeah, I know you're a very big fan, admirer of graphic novels as an art form. We've only talked about them once, I want to say, on this podcast when I did an episode almost a year ago, little over a year ago at this point, talking about the history of violence with Randy Burroughs and Orrin Locke. So I thought, earlier this year, I already did an episode with the good Randy talking about Cabaret, a book and a film that are centered in Berlin. They have that city at the core of the narrative. So this is almost, let's say, a continuation of this love letter to Berlin, one of my favorite cities in the world. I spent so much time there. So what better choice and with you than to talk about a graphic novel set in Berlin, The Coldest City by Anthony Johnston, and the film adaptation from 2017 called Atomic Blonde, directed by David Leitch.
So what have I learned after all this time? After all those sleepless nights? Lying to friends, lovers, myself, playing this crooked game in this crooked town filled with backstabbers and four-faced liars. I'll tell you what I've learned. One thing, and one thing only. I fucking love Berlin!
You mentioned that you are a fan of Atomic Blonde. Before we jump into the movie itself, I'm curious how it was for you to read this graphic novel, because you said it, they are very different, right? Stylistically, in terms of narrative as well, in some ways. What was your experience reading The Coldest City for the first time?
Well, again, to reiterate, the film has a vibrancy to it, visually, tone. It's a very strange type of warmth to the picture, the neon lighting, very David Leitch. The graphic novel is sort of like the antithesis to that. Like, it's it's totally different. It's like chalk, like I said, chalk and cheese. Having not known that and going into this, I was surprised where this was going to go and how it was stylized. I haven't read anything from the two main people either. And the cover of this is the reprint, where it's got Charlize Theron on the front with the logo and stuff like that. So I was like, oh, it must be based on something like that. Because I remember, is it Polar that was on Netflix with Mads Mikkelsen? It's like, I thought it was like going to be very similar. We get like heightened colors and stuff like that. That is not the case. This is very stripped back, very bones and all. Really interesting stuff. It's not a visual piece. Like if you look at like Frank Miller's Sin City, I know that's stuff like that are like 300.
Yeah.
There's a narrative there, but there's a stylized aesthetic that takes the precedent, I find. Like the image is like engulfing and in Frank Miller's stuff, and the narrative is more like the simplistic stuff. This is totally different in the narrative text center frame, and I'm not making this as a backhanded compliment to the art at all, but I think the art being very restrictive and being very not linear is probably the wrong word, but it's very strict, very straightforward. I think is more sort of a blessing when you read the graphic novel, because there's a sort of like seriousness to it. And because of that, I do think that you get more sort of a theme to it. Like it feels a lot more intense, a lot more dramatic. Maybe so that where the action makes up for that in the film. But I was surprised going into this. I was surprised how stripped back this is, very down to earth. Um, I think it did the cutaways back and forth quite well as well. It's a very easy and breezy read. It's very immersive. I just think that on occasion, I think it does somewhat not fail that because that again that feels like a derogatory term, but I do think the sense of style that it doesn't have something like a form of flair. But I think again, I can't really hold that against it because the fact that it is like that and it is very bare bones and it is very as a feeling of normality to it
Yeah.
adds more to the narrative itself, especially with the main character. So I can't really knock it, but I found it to a really easy experience to read. Really, not like fun, but well, again, again that's I keep on giving like backhanded compliments to it. It's not like it's not fun, but it's riveting. You know, like I think it unfolds to a degree where it gets the right beats and it's always quite an interesting read. But having I'll say I'm trying to compare it to something. I tell you what,
Yeah.
we did. I tell you what it reminds me of, and I'm pulling this slightly out of my ass, but this is a difficult.
Okay.
Do you remember when we did Psycho?
Yeah.
And we'd all seen the film before we read the book,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very difficult then to look at the book and not and they identify the clues to a degree where it's like, oh, that might work in an isolated read, but because we have the knowledge of the material on a different medium, that sort of attributes fail. Whereas you've still got to, they might highlight the work in the book. So I keep on in the graphic novel. There's like small details where, again, not to spoil anything, but she knows where the hotel is.
Mm-hmm.
He says, "I thought you've never been here before." I read the map. They work really well, even though I know the eventual twist in the film.
The final
I
reveal.
thought those little details really worked here because nothing here is very much on the nose, and because they have excuse me, and how it works with certain details from a perspective, I think that worked really well. There's nothing I can really fault here in sense of like, oh, I knew anything going in and nothing was necessarily surprising. I still think it worked really well. But having watched the likes of something, let's say, contemporary to this, your Tinker Tailor Soldier Spies, and certain elements like that, I think it really nails the atmosphere. And for what this goes for in aesthetic, tone, and especially for setting, to look at its contemporaries somewhat similar to that, especially like the Bridge of Spies, I thought it was a really compelling piece of work. I thought it was really interesting to watch, not to watch, but
To read.
Yeah, I'm interested about you because this is the first time you've read this as well, isn't it?
Correct, yeah. I was interested already back when the film came out, which honestly, not to talk about the film yet, but I do actually really like the title The Coldest City compared to Atomic Blonde. But Atomic Blonde fits the pulpy nature of the film, the more poppy nature that you were also really talking about. The Coldest City is like this double meaning, which is fun because you have the coldest city. We've both been in Berlin in winter. It's fucking pissing cold. It's so cold.
Yeah.
I was there this year between November and February, and we had minus degrees almost every day for weeks on weeks ahead. So it's a very cold city for sure, especially in 1989 when the wall came down. The novel is set during the fall of the Berlin Wall in November. But it's also the coldest city because it's a Cold War story, and I love Cold War stories. And I think you are on the money with the comparison. I see a lot of John le Carré in this, who wrote those as Friends of Smiley and Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy and all those Cold War era novels that are very much not about the action, not about the excitement. There's no James Bond car chases, fight scenes here. It's all about politics, spies backstabbing each other, talking in dimly lit rooms filled with cigarette smoke. It's very atmospheric. So in a way, I think Anthony Johnston really crafts a fascinating picture of Cold War era Berlin at a time of divide, when that divide was starting to fall down. I think it's a nice homage to all of that, to the writers that came before that kind of reinforce some of those cliches and narrative tropes. I was just left wanting more. That was my thing with this book because okay, you have those spy elements. You have the mystery behind this of, oh, who killed the spy, and we need to get this informant from the east of Berlin back to the west of Berlin. How are we gonna do this? There's a bit of intrigue there. Like you mentioned, there's a twist at the end which will spoil later on. But yeah, I thought, what's this saying about, for instance, trust? Is it saying something about trust in terms of a political setting, but also more intimate setting? Not really, I don't think. Um, is it working as a subversion of those narrative tropes? Not at all. It embraces all of them completely. I think the more interesting angle, which is also slightly downplayed for the majority of the book, is the sexism, because you have the
Mm.
protagonist of the story is Lorraine Broughton. She is this secret intelligence agent who's brought to Berlin. She's seemingly out of her depth as she's trying to navigate a city she doesn't know with a language she doesn't speak, or so she says. That's also something that I liked. She's like, I don't speak a lick of German, and then she's constantly talking German in a way that so many people who live there years don't speak. Um, I did. That was also a nice touch, by the way, just as a parenthesis. Whenever there's like German being spoken or French being spoken by some of the characters, it just stays there untranslated. Either you
Yeah.
look up a dictionary definition or you just pick it up. You're like, yeah, I think from the context, a couple of words, I know what everybody's saying. I like this element of sexism in the film, in the workplace, let's say, because she's paired with David Percival, who's this older MI6 agent who's been working in Berlin for decades. He knows the city inside and out, and he treats her as both a rookie and as a woman who doesn't fit in that environment, who cannot do a man's job. So that element was interesting. I wonder if you have any thoughts on Lorraine as a character and her relationship with Percival, but I wish it just did more with those things. Like I got to the ending and I was like, this was engaging. I completely agree with you. It's a page turner, but outside of the entertainment value of it, it really didn't leave me with much anything thought provoking. Even thinking about the historical context, it's not like I came away with it thinking like, hey, there's some interesting insights about Gorbachev or whatever else was happening, Reagan. I don't know.
I think this wraps up too early, and I think it needs to explore
Yeah.
those last sort of 4 or 5 pages to be like in more so even more chapters, because I think there's a lot of fallout there. The sexism comment I find quite interesting, and I think that's where the two mediums do quite well. I don't want to jump the gun here, but I suppose I have to slightly just to look at them both. I think to look at the graphic novel.
Hmm.
I think the presumption there is obviously the era of its time, and I think you go into that and how he talks. It's presented as an old man versus a young woman. I think you can quite clearly see where those two are going to butt heads, the new and the old, and the direction where the hierarchy towards the end of the graphic novel as well. It's a young man's game, and then obviously there's a young woman here. There's a nice little bit of irony there, but also a poetic justice to it. The thing about the film I find interesting is what they highlight is that's where the action comes in, because I think the preconceived notion about watching the film, and this is not a derogatory statement to again, I don't want anyone to read into this, but the contemporary films surrounding that and in a saturated market is your Liam Neesons, your
Hmm.
Keanu Reeves, and your Mel Gibsons. There seems to be an array of older gentlemen in the 50s and 60s doing the action piece. Liam Neeson ultimately take, and then Mel Gibson in his strange period of whatever the Gringo was and stuff like that. And Frank Grillo's doing it now to a lesser extent. But you've had your Jason Statham's doing. I think there's this preemptive acknowledgement that that genre is male dominated,
Yes.
and I think the only slight issue I have with the film, if I have very few, but we'll get there, is that when the film starts and in its non-linear narrative, it shows the Charlize Theron bloodied and bruised. Now, the graphic novel doesn't do that, so it gives you some sort of there's this journey that you don't necessarily know what the as a female character goes through in a sense of violence or
Hmm.
how far that gets in an action viewpoint. Whereas the film preemptively tells you she can hold her own or she gets her ass kicked. But ultimately, what that's telling you is that there's going to be action, there's going to be set pieces, there's going to be a bit of violence. And then how Charlize Theron acts during that and how they do the set pieces ultimately provides it that she can hold her own. But where the film, the film and the graphic novel here is where they divide, is that the graphic novel very much goes on intellect and the film goes on physicality. Now, what I find interesting about that is that you can probably have them both, but the two of them separate. And I think that works better for the medium. I think that the visualization of the film and the editing and the skill there and how it's the long takes showcases the dramaticness of that character and also how the performances, and I think that builds well to being in that environment where they're just sending everyone to kill this spy, this British spy.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think that adds more to that weight in that you see John Wick kill 70 people. Well, Charlize Theron can go as far as that character. And I think that's what it's trying to sort of subtly say in a very obvious statement. The graphic novel doesn't do that. The graphic novel is all about wit. And again, it's about that tonal difference, about John le Carre and Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. This is that you think because you've got a cock and balls and you're thinking with them, you think you're more highly intellectual than I am, you think you're running the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the fact that they play this character not necessarily as like someone who's like, it's difficult to assess it because obviously we know the twists and stuff, but they don't necessarily.
We can also talk about the twist actually because this is a spoiler podcast, so
yeah,
we can actually jump into
the reveal is that she's like a triple agent,
mm-hmm.
and again, there's little subtle breadcrumbs throughout this. What both we said, the German, knowing where things are in Berlin, and how she plays everyone against each other. But she's not necessarily. She doesn't come across as a wet wipe. She's not someone who is like accepts the banal nastiness of someone who thinks that. I mean, she comes across him multiple times as, "You're not in charge of me."
Mm-hmm.
You know, I report to C. She stands her ground very firmly, and she goes toe to toe with him, but she's far more in the know of the game than he is. And how that subtly writes itself, I think, is quite strong because she's not a very damsel in distress. She's not some innocent party to it. She's quite a strongly written character. But also, is that there's that little side swipe of, like, it's like not like it's underlined or anything like that, but there's like this wonderful little side swipe. When you read it again, she's almost like toying with him.
Mm-hmm.
She's giving it as good as she gets because she knows more than him. I like that idea. I think there's an interesting how that character's written as an intellect because of the lack of action in there. And there's an issue there of how it showcases certain twists because the black and white aesthetic at sometimes it's like, I think it just screams it needs colour. It just screams that it needs a little bit of vibrancy. Even if it was a Frank Miller viewpoint of just maybe blood.
Yeah.
But very much of the image I find is certainly black and white, which is interesting. Like that world is very grey. Murdering people, stuff like that. But I find that it's very much white background, black lines, and there's an interesting artistic viewpoint of that in the image. But for me, I think there's such a world building there. But again, that's coming back after the aesthetic of the film. So I'm as a personal point of view, but I do think it works nevertheless.
No,
I think go on.
I will say, to speak about the style of the drawings in the Coldest City. Sorry, Coldest Winter is the prequel. I do wish they were more stark, actually. Not so much. I like that. I like to differentiate the two. Honestly, like I like that the film is more colorful and embraces that style, and the graphic novel is black and white, those hard lines, as you were saying. And I don't mean this in a negative way because I know making a graphic novel is super expensive, super time consuming, but it felt slightly cheap at times. To the point where you literally have 2 or 3 panels occasionally, one after the other, where it's just like people talking. It's the same exact drawing. I don't know if you noticed this. There's like a couple of times, 3-4 times in the graphic novel where it's like, yeah, same image of like, head in the foreground, silhouette in the background, and just like a giant bubble of text, and it's like twice in a row. It's like, yeah, it was just too expensive. Like, what different angle should I put? Just use the same one, just copy and paste. It's fine. Save time, save money. But then it leads to having no real standout panel. And I'm not someone who necessarily reads a graphic novel just to be wowed by the images, but also it is a visual medium. That's why you're reading a graphic novel. And you mentioned Frank Miller, Sin City. It's like, wow, you get to some pages and it could be a painting. And there's, I want to say, maybe 3 instances in the entirety of the Coldest City, where I thought, okay, this is a great panel. Otherwise, it's just serviceable, which is a shame. I think. Like these are my 2 cents, but also I'm not super into graphic novels, so I don't have much more experience. I know you're more experienced. Also, hearing this coming from you, um, yeah, makes me feel better.
Well, the Walking Dead is another one where the
Oh,
original
right,
run is
yeah.
black and white, and then the deluxe versions are in color.
Mhm.
Now,
That's
the
the
start,
one I have. I have the original, like the first
yeah,
omnibus or whatever of The Walking Dead.
yeah, they're very expensive to buy now.
Yeah.
I went through them like loads when I was working last year, and I couldn't get enough of them. I sort of got to a point. I think I'm on like volume 25, but I get the
Wow.
fan made ones, where they're collated now. But these are in black and white, and it's interesting because I started in color, and the world. It's interesting because again, it's very much similar to this, but back to front, where that world building in color in that age is quite frightening because it's you have blood, you have gore, but you have like a certain level of humanity there that's just slowly like draining out,
Mm-hmm.
which you can say that is like subliminal, but it's somewhat obvious as well. But watching them in a stark contrast of black and white, there's just no life in it whatsoever, and I think it works in the context of the genre in The Walking
Yeah.
Dead.
Yeah.
This one, I think it like you said, it's going for a very much the Man from Out the Coast, like the Alec Guinness look. It very much
Very
wants to get
noir.
that.
Very noir
Yeah,
as
very
well.
noir. But to that extent, I think it's like because the film takes its time of getting from A, B, and C. This one feels like it's very quick, and all of a sudden we're with Spyglass. We're going through the march, and it just happens. And it feels like there's like 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8, like maybe even more, like 9, 10 frames missing there. I'm just getting, and then we're in the sewer.
Yeah.
And then we're out the sewer. And I know it's a narrative thing because it's been spoken in a somewhat of a non-linear fashion, and you can argue that she's pickpocketing certain types of narrative to install, and you could even like an unusual suspects type of dramatic form where we may even have an unreliable narrator, which I think for the most part is 50-50. But I agree with you. I think there's a very much you either double down on the aesthetic or you don't. And I think the fact that this doubles down, I can't, and it adds to the whole thematic and the mood. I can't really knock it, but I just think, like you said, on a personal opinion, I think it just needs a little bit more of a vibrancy, a little bit more, just something there. Do you know? Like it just feels like very minimalistic to a point where I get the point, but this is like could be so much more enriching.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, that isn't a personal statement. I still think as an entirety, I think it works completely. But going back to the sexism thing, like I said, I just think it's the viewpoint of two different mediums within a narrative where proving that, not necessarily proving to an audience them wrong, but showing two very different audiences two different vibes. I don't think you could get away with showing this much action in the graphic novel because it would turn into something more like, not like pornography wise, but do you know what I mean? Like it would feel a lot more like I don't know. It would just I get the impression it would be more exploitative in some way. It probably wouldn't be, but I don't think you could adequately sort of project that like with Berserk that Keanu Reeves is doing. I know you've read a little bit of this, but if you ever read the first like 4 issues of the John Wick thing they did, that just does not it does not compute whatsoever. And I think yeah, and I think the fact that it's a very I know I don't mind them per se, but the Berserk I like, but the John Wick stuff is difficult. They just don't correlate whatsoever. But I think the slow style, the sentiment of a graphic novel really works for that type of character, which is very slow, very drawn out. But I agree with you. I think it could have been drawn out a little bit more, had a little bit more spice to it, a little bit more tension. Let's have a few more conversations with people. It feels like everything's very fleeting, so fleeting. And then when you get to the film, I think the action sort of stuff, to a lot of people might take over. But I think it's just that type of, I think it's that type of like genre that's out now, isn't it? Like it's
Yeah.
just full on. How many people can you kill? Like everything. Like Kung Fu now it's how many can you
Just
kill?
about
And
body
that's
count, not about the
yeah,
intensity, the
yeah.
meaning behind the action, which is a shame. But that's actually a good point because I'm curious to know which was your favorite scene or favorite scenes from the book. But I will say I have two written down, and one of them actually is the assassination on Spyglass and the entire escape, which I don't. I agree with you in a sense that I don't really like it that much on a narrative level. I think everything with Spyglass in the book is so rushed. Just like, oh, we need to get him out from East Berlin, and he's just there. And it's like, okay, we're doing it. We're doing the plan. Just like so quickly. It doesn't feel like there's a proper build up to it. It's just so rushed. But the actual sequence, it's played entirely without dialogue. It's like, the protesters on East Berlin that want the wall being torn down. You have the sniper, the shot. She sees the sniper. She runs in the building. They have the fight. The sniper falls. She goes in the sewers. It was done in a way that, like you said, it's very quick. But I actually appreciated the visual storytelling. It's one of those rare instances in the book where there's no dialogue, no nothing, just pure action in terms of like movement happening, synergy. And the second part, I did like the ending. I think the way they do the reveal,
They're
those
both
final.
my choices.
That's yours. Go for it. Describe the ending.
No,
then.
no, they're both my choices, but I have a really interesting reading of the first one, so please go ahead.
No, and for the ending, I think it plays. I think that's where the sexism element finally kind of comes full circle, which is why I think it was the only real lasting impact for me in any way, because I think the book has those elements of trying to subvert the male gaze, but it doesn't push them a lot, or like pushing a female lens in the narrative. But you have like, it's cute. There's the instance where you have the Frenchman, the owner of the restaurant, who's trying to flirt with her, and he cannot really give her much information. And then he's like, "Oh, I don't have any purpose left." And she's like, "No," just like closing the door. He's like, "No, you can stay here. You have a purpose. I can use you." To a good point. Usually it's the man womanizer who's using the women around him, blah blah blah. So it was nice to have this slightly subverted. But again, he could
The
have
film
done
does
more.
that as well.
True. And the film adds a queer angle to it, which was nice. But again, we'll get to the film because I have more positive things to say about the film's character, actually. But the ending is nice. It really works. I think they revealed the twist. I knew it was coming. We both knew it was coming.
Yeah.
But it's just handled with the wig, the way she goes to the train station, the dialogue being repeated, those little bubbles popping up, and then her crossing the border. Like, oh yeah, she needs the time off. Everyone underestimates her. From David Percival, from the moment she gets to Berlin up until the very end, her bosses, everyone underestimates her. And that's how she wins. Because she's a woman in a man's job and she knows how to use them. I thought that was like, it's nicely done, classy. I was reading that apparently this was supposed to be the first of a series of books set in Berlin, Cold War. They only did a prequel, which I think is still connected to this, right? Neither of us have read it.
No, yeah.
But I'm curious about your choices then, how you see those scenes.
I'll start with the latter. I'll start with the second one because I don't have much to say. But again, I like how it just. I like how it's positioned of the cutbacks and forwards. I think that's very difficult to do in graphic novel form. Right in the film, the editing it's like very much like, again, The Usual Suspect, back and forth, building tension. It feels very much like very easy to digest. The graphic novel I find is always interesting. Yeah, I find the graphic novel is always very interesting when they try to do that because that's quite like a hit or miss type of attribute in that, because not only is the form non-linear anywhere, but to do that and not have color as well. I think it's always quite interesting because there's also like a depth perception difference. Did you see like the grading of it slightly different as well? It's like lighter.
Yeah, true.
The image is like lighter compared to the other stuff, which I don't know if that's
because they're leaving Berlin as well. It's like, you're changing the setting, different scenery, the wall has been torn down.
Again,
like
if that's a form of flair that it's got, like a bit of warmth, or not enough warmth, but a bit of tone, then I quite like that. I quite like that aesthetic, that subliminal imagery and draining the image and so on and so forth. But I think there's sort of like such a lack of that throughout, where I'm like, oh, that comes as more like in hindsight than an actual fact. Like we're picking up on it now, but not when I'm there, when I'm reading it, which I always think is like an interesting development for me. Like if I can spot it straight away, I always feel like it's a conscious thing. Whereas on the latter, I feel like, oh yeah, and But
It sticks with
that
you.
might be
It
me.
sticks with you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that might just be me being slow. So fair enough, and it's been said
It's also
before.
why we do this. We process it in a way. When you're just saying it out
Yeah.
loud, it feels obvious in a way it wasn't in the moment.
So the first one, I have a different opinion, not a different opinion, but a different sort of set of where I come to this. Okay,
Mhm.
I find this an interesting read with her narrative because there are bits and pieces in here that obviously she changes. When we get to see the photographs, they change. She burns them because she knows that she's on them, and so on and so forth. What's to say that she ever even had that incident with the sniper? What's to say, because there's no dialogue there. She
Mhm.
didn't somewhat back herself up there. She didn't say that. She never interrogated him, and it's even mentioned in, I think, in the graphic novel, like, you didn't, and he's like, oh, I didn't really have time to ask her. I just wanted to get out of there.
Even in the
And
zoo
then
where she finds a body and she says, "I
yes,
looked in the pockets, but you don't see it in the
yes,
images
exactly.
themselves." She just run past it.
And I was like, oh, this is really interesting. This, because she fights the guy, and she throws him down the stairs, which is sort of like directly influenced with the film as well. But more so, that's more of like a central set piece
Mhm.
there. Very drawn out, very atmospheric, very tense. This one isn't. This one is like the moment where things just change here. It's like the middle point of where you get to a point and then it goes all the way downhill.
It's much earlier than I thought as well in the book
Yes.
coming to it, because
Yeah.
in the film it's like third act
Yeah.
highlight.
This is
In
where I
here
was
it's
like,
like smack dab in the middle.
yeah, this is where I was reading. I was like, oh, this is going to be short. Like, I hope there's more. This is where I knew. I was like, oh, really?
Hmm.
But again, I don't mind that as long as the work works. You know, that's not a problem to me. But I always, when I was reading that, I was like, oh, I wonder if this ever happened. I wonder if that sniper was her counterpart. I wonder if
Hmm.
they planned it, and then she never actually had that, because she takes him down very quickly, but she shows no signs of physicality throughout the piece. Aside from that, she does it very quickly. Now it can work on two levels there. It can then prove to the point where she can then physically take care of herself, and again, it alludes to that she's a lot more like powerful, not powerful like she's a fucking superhero, but she's a lot more ingrained into that type of culture than she gives out to being just a simple intellect of
Hmm.
a spy. There's a physicality there. But then there's also a thing where she's trying to convince these other people, namely her supervisors, let's say, back when she's getting being debriefed in the office, and she's convincing them, and they bite for it, don't they? Like she's just almost being killed because they were aiming for both of them. Remember, maybe she was the target, and then she takes care of him, and it sort of works, but in the flow, it's sort of not something you can pick up on. It's one of those very little simplistic but really nice small details. I was like, it just gets you again. It's like in the moment, really little brilliant bit of thinking. But I would say that. But like you, there's very little subtle details there I quite like looking in the pockets. But that whole thing from when that shot goes off to when she gets back over the border and they go on about the body, it just feels like there's something missing there. Do you not feel the same? It feels like there's a
Hmm.
bit of a part where it's, and then there's like a jump to conclusions about things, and that's where the she in a again in context of her conversation, that's where she changes and she gets the manipulation on board. That then she's like, oh, maybe it was Percival. So perhaps that's the reason why maybe she's jumping the gun and be like, well, this is what I found, just to get away from, not the questioning of like, well, why did you even go back for him then? Like, why did we need to do that? Why didn't you take him through the tunnels?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then she's like, well, but well, the
She's
tunnels would,
planting the seed
yes,
to.
exactly. So I think narratively, I think it's quite interesting. But when you read it, it leaves a lot more to be desired throughout the whole piece, like you said. But I think the little small breadcrumbs and the seeds, like you mentioned, in actual fact, you could probably argue that the material writes itself here. And there's quite a smart way of depicting your narrative there. I think that's quite a somewhat ingenious. If it's conscious, fair enough. But maybe I'm reading more to it. But those would be my two, like you said. But there's no I don't know, like you said, there's not that you don't. I tell you something. We keep on mentioning Berlin, the cold. Is it like the coldest city or the coldest winter? All these sort of things, and you never really get a grasp of that city. We've both
Yes.
been there. I've been in there in February where it's horrific. You almost live there now, but you go there very often. You've been to the film festival more than I have. But the film festival in February is horrifyingly cold, horrific,
Yes.
seriously bad. And Berlin now is like a metropolis. Back then, you watch The Bridge of Spies and stuff like that, and it's basically like a small village in Yorkshire almost. Like it's very
I would say that
downtrodden,
maybe.
yeah, very very grey, but it's very like brick and mortar sort of stuff. But you don't really get an assessment of Berlin, do you? Don't really, we get like a conversation about all how it is on the east and the west, but you never get to really feel the gravitas and ultimately sort of the feeling of what that world is like.
Hmm.
You get perceptions, but you don't. I mean, you go to a restaurant and then she goes like to a house that looks like the middle of the US. Did you see that? Like when she
Like
goes to the
the
house,
building, yeah.
yeah, and like there's
Like
a garage.
suburbs with
Yeah, I was
Percival.
like, this is very strange. There was just things like that. It's almost like if you were like, you tell me you've never been to Berlin by telling me you've never been to Berlin, that would come up.
I
You know?
appreciate that they don't go for like postcards locations, It's like
Yeah, well,
sequence in Brandenburg, sequence in Potsdamer Platz,
Alexanderplatz,
sequence
yeah.
here, sequence there. It's like, no, they don't do that. And in a way that I can appreciate, it would be like in Venice, things set in Venice, they always shoot in those two same corners. Like, of course, because that's what
Yeah.
Venice is to people. But then I do agree with you, actually. I do think the city itself as a city is downplayed. They do play up with the east and west, of course. It's central to the narrative. I do appreciate that they have different nationalities. You have the Frenchman, the Polish one, the Soviets, the Americans, the Brits, all kind of mixing with each other. I think that's intriguing. But yeah, we can both say the narrative of the book not the most engaging. Is it gonna be the same with the film? Of course, Coldest City, it wasn't a big hit, but it was a successful enough graphic novel, and it caught the attention of studios, and it ended up being bought and then turned into a movie directed by David Leitch, fresh off the making of John Wick, co-directed with Chad Stahelski. Chad Stahelski kept going with the John Wicks. He made Chapter 2, Chapter 3, while David Leitch basically continued on his own path as a Hollywood action filmmaker. And Atomic Blonde was him trying to prove himself. A standalone, no other help as director. Not even a big budget, to be honest. I want to say this was close to what John Wick was, around $20 million, more or less. Starring Charlize Theron as Lorraine Broughton. Then you have James McAvoy, Eddie Marsan, John Goodman, Toby Jones, Sofia Boutella, Bill Skarsgård. It's a big cast. It's I would say, great cast,
Stat.
actually. Stacked. And I can start very quickly, actually, because I know you have a lot to say about this movie. But just because I know you like it more than I do, I've had a rocky relationship with this film. I
Oh
wish
wow.
I liked it more than I do. I've seen it now 4 times, which is not a small amount, to be honest. Um, this time revisiting it for the first time in almost 6 years, 7 years even, I think. I liked it much more. Also because of the graphic novel, actually, because this made me appreciate all of the changes that they make to the narrative. I think the characters are more interesting and better fleshed out. Spyglass, especially. I think Eddie Marsan always disappears in every character he plays, and I think here is also very good. Um, I appreciate that this actually makes use of Berlin more as a location. They
Yes.
did shoot primarily in Budapest, but they do have some scenes in Berlin itself, which are nice. Um, I really like the action. Even though I have a problem with it, we'll get to it later. I have a massive problem with the action, and I just pleasant. I think the spy intrigue works. I think the double crossings work. I don't particularly like the ending here. They go for this like Hollywood action ending. We're gonna have sequels that never happen, of course. But yeah, I do like Atomic Blonde. I do remember. I'm curious now about your thoughts revisiting it now for the first time. I do remember that you had around that time just like a love for any film that would have New Order playing.
I knew you were going to
This
say
one
that.
being the
Yeah.
opening song.
Yeah, I remember tweeting about that. Like, what would it have been? What, almost 9 years ago now. I remember tweeting that. I
Yeah.
remember you liking it as well. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
remember putting in my review when you mentioned it as well. I'll try to keep this brief.
We bonded because of Atomic Blonde and the John Wicks. I remember this was like
Yeah,
early days of
yeah.
Letterboxd for both of us.
I remember not knowing anything about this, and I have this thing where I try to do it. It's very difficult being in this space and then trying to be naive, but I try it my most. I read a lot about the films. I read as much as I can about the about films that are coming out, news stories, and so forth. Where I draw the line is I don't watch trailers. If I'm interested in the film, like for example, the 28 Years movies, I'll watch the first trailers. Like, this is
Nice.
gonna be amazing.
Yep.
John Wick Chapter 4, I'll watch the trailers. The stuff
Yeah.
I'm really hotly anticipating, like The Matrix.
Mhm.
I remember being in Venice with you. I remember the trailer got released when I was in the hotel room and my wife and my mom was there. And I almost had a breakdown. I was like, this is amazing. And
You
the
watched it on
music
a
was
loop
on.
basically the whole day, I remember afterwards.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was like I was like for trailers I try to avoid as much as I can and details I try to avoid as much as I can aside from being in the theater itself when you get inundated with them. However, I remember watching this in fake IMAX at View, which means like it's like very big size, but all they do is they stretch the screen. It's not actually not an IMAX form.
Fake
It's like
IMAX is such a
yeah, no, it
brilliant. Yeah,
is.
yeah, 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 I
I
get it.
watched. I saw the Kingsman 2 in it as well. And I think I saw Fast and Furious Hobbs and Shaw, which would be interesting to mention as well. But I remember 2017 for me was an interesting year because this is the year where you get Mother, really interesting sort of stuff for me there.
Shape of
Really on
Water,
the
Baby
cusp.
Driver,
Yeah, yeah.
Get
Just
Out.
leaving university, or it would be my final year. Alien Covenant again, it would be my final year, and you know, you start a difficult journey at university if anyone's been there, and then you end it in a very similar place where you sort of got what you wanted, but you're now in sort of not disarray, but you're back to where you began, but you've gained something. I remember being back home watching this at the end of the year, and I remember it's like, oh, it's a David Leitch film. He did John Wick. We'll watch it. I'll go watch it on my own. I remember the opening with New Order, Blue Monday. I was like, this bastard's got me straight away. Whatever happens after here will just be downhill. And I found myself to be like constantly on a line here, like it never dropped. It was
Mhm.
like, oh, this is really good, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Then you get the Stalker reference, Tarkovsky
Yeah.
references, all sorts of stuff. I thought the action was really well done. I liked the score. I thought James McAvoy here, just coming off, I believe it would have been Split the same year. Extraordinary.
I think he
Has the
shot them
broken
back to back because
yeah,
he
because
got
he
hurt
broke
on
his
the set
arm
of
during
Split.
Split. Yeah, yeah, he broke his hand. Yeah, I think it's great to watch actors and actresses push the boundaries, and I think James McAvoy playing that piece of shit when you look at him in Split, great year for him. I think Charlize Theron does an excellent job here as well, literally playing with the big boys. No one can stop her. It's again, but it shows. I think it shows the case of like, why do we get 4 John Wick movies with Keanu Reeves when you can argue that Shelley Theron is an Academy Award winning actress who can give, let's say, a little bit more depth to those characters, and this more grounded. I always felt that this is a better performance.
Mhm.
I don't think it's a better film than the first few John Wick movies. Maybe you could probably say it's better. You would say it's probably better than the second one, but I think this is really, really good stuff. And I love the aesthetic, I love the environment, love the tone, love the warmth to it. It looks fucking freezing throughout. I love the soundtrack to it. I love that every breath that these people take, you can tell there's burning back in the throat because it's so cold there. I like the twists. Again, I always saw this as one and done. I can understand the bait at the end, and there is definitely a bait. But I always found this to be really, really interesting. I always thought it was great, David Leitch, that you can do the same thing, but you can give it a new lick of paint, and you can do something sort of vibrant with it. You can take the tools and you can do something with it. And then comparing this to the likes of Hobbs and Shaw, where that sort of mainstream
Okay.
doing the same shit over and over again. And you look at this where, yeah, it's very much a John Wick clone, but at least it has a vibrance to it. It has this identity that feels, oh, that's Atomic Blonde. And interesting enough, my mum and dad have watched this, and we watched it on television since. I've watched it a few times, and it always gets a good round of applause for them as well. It's an interesting film to watch. I haven't really changed my opinion on it, but I remember when it first came out, I had a not an argument, but I have a friend called Joe McFarlane was at university with me as well, and he hated it. Hated it. I can't remember what his review was like. I can't even remember if Joe's got letterbox anymore. But I remember Joe was very derogatory in the terms of how it used sexuality, I'm sure. It was like it was almost like exploitative pornography at certain times.
What?
And when you yeah, no, no, I don't mean it. I'm probably taking Joe out of context here, so I do apologize. But I think it was more like it just feels like someone's wet dream on certain occasions, like beating this woman up, taking her through the ringer. And I can understand that, but you're always going to get certain derogatory statements like that because it's because of the use of gender in there. And I think a lot of people will watch that subconsciously to watch this woman get beat up in a way that undoubtedly exists. But I don't think that's what the actual central thing about this film is about. It's about the, not to like quote Rocky or anything, but she gets the absolute shit kicked out of her. And I think there's this sentiment that because she's and I'm air quoting here, because she's a woman,
Mm-hmm.
she'll get splattered. And I think there's this, again, like I mentioned before, I think there's this preordained feeling that we've been not bastardizing like that, but I think we've been slowly but surely portrayed as like that action genre is a male dominated field. And I got me wrong, you've got like your Linda Hamilton, Sigourney Weavers, but I don't think you've had something similar to this. Now I do know we have a lot of this in the Asian market. Michelle Yeoh, don't get me wrong, I'm not naive, but I think in the Western market, these things are quite rare, and especially on this pedigree of where it feels very organic. Nothing feels forced. And I think they've tried to replicate this a few times. They did a film with Karen Gillian. Is it Gunpowder Milkshake or something like that?
Karen Gillian. No, it was Lena Headey.
No, Karen Gillian's in one of them though.
Oh, was it also her
Where
in that thing? I was like, everyone was in that one.
I think it's like Gunpowder Milkshake or something.
You are right.
I
Karen
didn't
Gillian,
mind it.
Freya Allen, yeah, Lena Headey. You're right, yeah. Carla Gugino
Yeah.
and Michelle Yeoh. Those are Angela Bassett, yeah. Who's who
Yeah,
of
it feels like
action.
there's like that then feels like a clone to me to the John Wick stuff. Whereas this, I always felt like it stood on its own on 2 feet. No, right, I think I'd give that film a positive review anyway. But that's my feeling on it. But I've always really enjoyed this. Always enjoyed it. And to be fair, how it uses its sexuality here, I don't really see a problem with it. I think in the context of the film, it's quite freeing. We've been preordained to like watch James Bond like shag everything that's like has a heartbeat to legs.
Yeah.
Like I think like this is a world where it's very grey, and I think the fact that she wants to use her sexuality or at least just have fun, or even if this character's bisexual, gay, whatever, like, well, yeah, she's in the 80s. Let's follow the Berlin Wall. They're in the midst of making money and killing people, and it's like there's no rules here in this world. There's no rules. I mean, within the gravity of this severity of the real world scenario, it's not like John Wick where that's like,
Yeah.
We're somewhere else. There's like this is like a free for all here, and it's life and death. And I think there's an interesting one where it's like, I don't know. Again, I'm speaking up my ass here, but I always get the impression that this type of lifestyle is that every day could be your last. And I think that's why Bond is portrayed by Fleming in such a way where he'll have caviar for breakfast and scrambled eggs, and and sleep with the PPK under his pillow and have a cigar and cigarettes and drink, because his life is short in this career. And I think I just attribute it to that. I don't see a derogatory statement where it's like, oh, there's an exploitative notion because she's a woman and we get to see a sex scene. I think if you put a male in that, I think it would. I don't know. I don't see an agenda there for me.
I will say it goes actually beyond that. I think rewatching it now after almost a decade since it came out, it's I wouldn't say it's progressive necessarily, but one of the things they do change is the gender of LaSalle, the Frenchman bar restaurant owner. It's turned into a female spy. And they make her much more interesting. She's like this vulnerable, like new to the job, clearly not made out to be a spy, because she gets spotted very easily. And they have these flirtatious moments, and they have a sex scene, and they are together in the sense of they just sleep together. There's no romance necessarily, but there is this element of connection between two women in a man's world, in a violent world, who find each other and who can help each other. And Lorraine Broughton, Charlize Theron, like she gives her advice and she tells her like, quit this job, look after your shoulder, look after yourself, be careful. Like there is this element of camaraderie that not even camaraderie, it's like sisterhood properly. And rewatching it now, I think it's touching in a way that it goes further than the book does with having those elements, because I want to say there's not a single other female character in the entire book, maybe, right? I might be wrong, but definitely not among the key players. So I think it's a much needed companion to have for her to play off of. That's not just James McAvoy being extra sleazy. Who's a riot in this? And as I said before, like
Yeah.
everyone is perfectly casted. I perfectly cast in this film. There's Till Schweiger has a cameo as a watchmaker. Sam Hargrave, like it's a very strong cast. Our guy from all the John Wick movies, Daniel Bernhardt as an invincible
Yes.
invincible henchman.
Yeah.
I
He's an
my
agent.
main
Yeah.
problem, and this time like I also ended up afterwards listening to the director's commentary.
Oh
I don't know if
wow.
you've done it yet, but it's a commentary between David Leitch and the film's editor, who is Icelandic Elisabeth Ronaldsdottir. Um, Fun listen, very fun listen, also very enlightening. It has confirmed my main problem with the film, um, which primarily was concerned with the oneer, the one take action scene, or seemingly one take. It
Right.
has like 25 hidden cuts, which is fine. It's an amazing action set piece. Everyone was talking about it. It's grounded, it's brutal, it's messy, it's this fist fight, knife fight, gunfight, car chase. It's amazing, right? Every other action scene in this movie is straight out of a comic book film. You have an incredibly grounded sequence, and then everything else is so heightened. It's so over the top. She's jumping off buildings, she's crashing in cars and getting off, and she still has perfect hair. Like all those things are happening. Slow motion during the last fight. I found it to be really inconsistent. And I was like, why are we
It's
doing
not.
this? Why is it like that? And David Leitch actually said it's more about the cool. Why are we doing some things? Because it's cool. Because it's more about the cool. And it makes
Right.
so much sense. There's so many parts in this movie where you think, why are they doing this? Why are they doing that? Because it's cool. Even rewatching it, I was like, the only thing that bothered me in terms of like violence against women was the death of Sofia Boutella's character. Meant to be hard to watch, but she's also wearing like this skimpy lingerie that's showing off all of her body, and she's getting strangled. I was like, this, you could have given her different clothing, but then they're joking about like, oh, we need the cut here so you can justify that she's in different clothes. It's like, what? What? So that's my primary problem with this film. I don't really like the spray painted titles. And he was like, oh, cinema hasn't evolved as a medium. Who's stopping us from doing this? It's like, we can do whatever we want. And it's flashy and it's colorful. It's like, yeah, just because you can do some things doesn't mean you have to do some of those things. Um, it was a bit, it confirmed David Leitch's directing style. We've seen it get worse in some ways, I would say, with the following films. I do kind of like Bullet Train, to be honest. I don't love it in any way, but I find it enjoyable,
Yeah.
surface level. I don't hate any of his movies, to be honest, but all of them I'm thinking, oh, it's kind of shallow. And then you listen to him and it's like, yeah, I do this thing because it's cool, just because it's
Yeah.
cool. And the last thing I will say, and then I'm curious to hear your thoughts about this. Another sequence that really always bothered me is another like one shot action moment. It's after the father figure fight and she jumps out of the building and she's in the courtyard and two police guards come and she just pulls up the baklava, whatever you want to call it, like turtleneck, whatever. She covers her face, she punches them, kicks them, and she pulls it down. Little sting, she leaves. Right? Crowd pleasing moment. She just beat up an entire apartment full of cops and all of them saw her face. Why does she have to do this now? Turns out this was supposed to be the Comic Con scene. Reveal! Charlize Theron did it. She's showing her face. It was all her in that shot. Because it's cool, Jack. I was like, why are we
But
doing this? Why are you
I
doing
quite, I
this? It
quite
doesn't
like
make
that.
sense. It's cool.
I,
It's cool. I agree. It's a cool shot. It looks nice, but doesn't make sense. She just fought people who saw her face. Why is she pulling this up now? I'm curious your thoughts on my
there's a lot.
rambling.
There's a lot to go through that. So I'll start the back end. I'll go back where you started.
He'll go
I quite
backwards.
like the sentiment of being like, I will dictate my film and not let the narrative or the sentiment dictate me. I quite like that. I quite like that. I think it's very not to like again to go into anything else, but I quite like the Wachowski sentiment. It's like we're gonna do that because we can, and it's not gonna make type of like a lot of sense, but it's artistic, it's fun, and again it's cool. Because I think cinema you can be trapped in the idea of realism. I think there's a lot of stuff where you become ultimately a prisoner to your own material. I think it writes itself to a point, and once you back
Yeah.
yourself into that, I think the writing dictates it. I think here they sort of like needed a bit more of explosion throughout. So fair enough. I think it's his film. I think it works for me. But I think, like you said, once you pick holes in this, it becomes quite clear. But I think the John Wick stuff as well is equally as like, oh, well, now we've got suits that can, and there's like retroactive things where, oh, okay, like is that because it's cool? Because it's cool, like gunfights in the middle of the public in the train station with Common, like, but that's cool. Like that's fun. It's cool. The big fight in Paris. In the fall. Don't try to defend the John Wick
I
now.
will
Come on.
defend I will defend them because those things are purely set in fantasy world. And I think Atomic Blonde, if it had either grounded fights throughout, or they kept that level of heightened fantasy for the whole film, it would make sense. But then I'm thinking, okay, why is she going full Jackie Chan in an apartment fighting cops, like not breaking a sweat? And then she's having problems with these guys in the building, and it's
Yeah.
completely different style of fighting, completely different camera moves and everything. That's the thing I like about John Wick, is just consistency. Because if they pull the same thing, whether it's like, oh, now this scene they're gonna barely be able to hit each other with a punch. It's like, but we just
No,
saw them go through 50 people, shooting them with no problem. That's my primary problem. Yeah.
no, fair enough. To go back to your point you made about Sophie Botella, when she first meets Charlize Theron, there's actually a cover of Blue Monday by the band called Health, and they're from
Oh
like
yeah.
yeah, very good cover of it. I quite like Health. They did the score to Max Payne 3.
Yes.
Yeah,
One of the
really
best video
good.
game scores. I love
Yeah,
it. They have a new
really good
album that
stuff.
just dropped. I listened to it
Yeah,
yesterday,
yeah.
actually.
And then
Side note.
they're one of their members is like become a DJ now, and he did a remix of Rob Zombie's Dragula, which is really good as well.
Oh,
But
cool. I
again,
need to listen to
yeah,
that.
really good stuff. I've seen not to I saw Health in Chicago. They did 2 songs and then stormed off. And I was really hoping to go see them because I've always quite liked them as a band, like
Nice.
Stone Faced and New Coke and stuff like that. I've always really liked Health, and they do a lot for the Rockstar as well, the Grand Theft Auto stuff. Anyway, moving on. Uh, that's brilliant. I always really liked that cover of that song. But I think that there's a misinterpretation with them two characters, and I think you nailed it. I think it just shows, and again, this is the intellect. What I think the graphic novel shows really well is that Charlize Theron character knows what this relationship is, knows what she wants out of it. And I think Sophie Botella's character is so naive to it. I think she almost like falls for it a little bit.
Yeah.
Like she falls for the idea of what this could be, and I think she almost romanticizes the relationship. And I think the fact that not that Charlize Theron's character is like 3 steps ahead, but for the most part, you can say that like she knows where this is all going to a certain extent, and she knows the pieces that she needs to put together to get this big jigsaw to work in order for a plan to work. And I don't think that she expects that character to turn up into it. And I think there's a really nice little bit of authenticity with that character there. There's a bit of an emotion that comes out, a little bit of, let's say, the curtain drops a little bit, the mask drops, and I think that's probably one of the sequences throughout the film where there's probably a little bit of truth there, a little bit of reality, where it's like the curtain's being drawn, like, just need to stop away from this. This is going to end badly. Just go do something else. And I think when you see it in context, it's like, oh, it feels like the casual motif of, the elder statesman and the young kid. It's like, oh, you need to get out of this, and you think, well, but there's a character that's very revered, should I say, and understands where this is going, who has been in here a long time and can read the game and knows full well if this person gets mixed up in the consequences of actions that she's a third party. It's not going to end very well if she has to go or not. So I quite like that bit. I think it works really well in hindsight, and I think how that kill is unregistered, I think is sort of doubled down to being even more horrific. I've never sort of, I think there's definitely a voyeuristic eye on that with going to the shower and stuff like that and how it's been strangled. But there's like a really difficult viewing of that as well, where it's very voyeuristic, it's very in your face. There's a lot of bulging. There's how it's shot and how it's lit is somewhat similar to the sex scene as well. Like there's a warmth on the screen with the neon lights as well, and use of hands and
Those
of
close-ups of everything in
yeah.
detail. Yep.
I think it's a very difficult thing of watching something being quite sensual, and then it's something being very sadistic, and seeing them melding together. And there's like how it's just how those both are shot somewhat similar, but the obviously the thematics and the mood are totally two different things. I think there's an interesting parallel there. But I quite like that dynamic. But just again, moving ahead to your gripes, I'm sort of not really bothered about the world building breaks here, because I'm so into the action stuff like that. I think once I sort of pull myself away, again, I think with these sort of things, I sort of agree with you. No, like 100%. You can undoubtedly sort of see where these are going, and especially with like sort of like sequences how it's shot. It also feels like when you say it's a Comic-Con teaser, like you then when you say that, it's like, ah, yeah, that's like the first 10 minutes you show to the showcase, don't you? The
Yeah,
reveal. And I suppose like then you've got to get it into your film. But I don't know, fair play. I think if it is what it is, I can sort of agree with that. The one take thing is interesting, because I remember this was like not really reported on before the film came out. Wasn't really reported on when the film was out. It was only sort of like retroactively where people like post it on Twitter. It's like, oh, watch this, and then it came up with the Sam Mendes thing in 1917. It felt like a
Yeah.
prolonged period of time where people were trying to do it, and they were like faking people out as well. And then the German film, I can never remember it, where
Victoria.
have you ever seen, I remember yeah,
That's the one.
you ain't not
Victoria.
going to do it better. Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's
You're
actually
never going to do
one
it better.
take.
Yeah, and it's ingenious. The artificial eye Blu-ray to that is extraordinary. 100% recommend go watch it. You're never going to outdo something like that, because they did it, and they did it for real. And I think everything else is going to be sort of a loose fabrication of the truth. Again, it works very weirdly enough in line with the thematic of the film. But there was like a period of time where people were just trying to do it, weren't there? Like James Bond then did it with Spectre in
Yeah.
2015, a few years before, and there was like they were all like sort of like faux entertainment value. Like they don't serve anything but aside from being like like attributes to showcase how big your dick was. Like it just like it didn't serve any purpose. It didn't really affect anything. It didn't really showcase anything about the film aside from like the director's ego. And to be fair, in this is one of very few where I remember in the cinema you can hear like a pin drop there. Like Daniel Bernhardt throws her against the wall, and like you can
Oh.
hear her go. You can hear like the air leave her body. And I remember watching it in the cinema, and you can hear it, and then everyone's silent. I remember watching it with my mum and dad, and we had it on the big TV, pitch black, and I'd bring down my lights at the back that would lit up the back of the room.
Mhm.
So like when I watched this film, I put the backlights on, sync it with the television, put the headphones on, put the not noise cancellation, and then it's spatialized audio, so if it goes there and there,
Mhm.
and it's a really good experience.
Like
But
Dolby
every time I get to
Atmos
that,
type.
yeah, Dolby Atmos as well. It's in 4K as well on Apple TV. When I always showcase that sequence, or not when I showcase, but when we watch the film, everyone goes quiet, and I think it nails that it happens at the right time in the film, probably the midway point, but I think you're right. I think it comes at the latter half of the
Yeah.
second act, doesn't it, as well? In the perfect point, it takes all the energy out, because you know then there's a risk here. I think it's perfectly placed. I think if he had done one teaser at the start with it and then built up to it, I think I could understand that, but the momentum I don't think would hold the actual sequence itself, because I think you're building up to it, and it's just I think you get the idea of what's going on here, but the actual set piece itself, I think it'll take something away from it, because you're giving little bites of it. Here, the fact that it's a normal sort of edited feature, and then it happens there that midpoint, and it's a sequence where it very much make or break for this character, and it's just the enthusiasm, the hunger, the desire takes over, and the drain of the body, physicality get. I think it's a really interesting thing where the physicality has to meet the ingenuity of the brain, how they meld together, sink or swim, fight or flight. I think it really comes at a perfect way. And then after that, you get a bit more of the comic book scenarios. But I think that the one take works really well.
I agree.
I wish,
No, agree.
but I do wish, like you said, though, just go for it. Just do the one. If it takes 16 days, just go for the one. showcase, if you want to sort of evolve the medium, again, like making comments about like the spray paint intercut of like where we are settings wise. I
Yeah.
mean, that's not very brave, is it? But shoot that in one go because Charlize Theron can ultimately hold herself there. I think she's excellent in it as well.
No, I'm not actually against the hidden cuts, to be honest. I think like was this actually the first one that did it in a very like showstoppy way, and then everyone tried to replicate it. I'm trying to think if there was anything before this one.
There was definitely Spectre, but it was a showcase, wasn't it? That's a
But it was
show
like the
reel.
opening, right? Like the opening
Yeah,
shot, which is like not really an action scene per se. Just like him walking through the city, which is impressive still. But yeah, everyone else then tried to replicate this afterwards, and it doesn't. It always feels like, oh, we figured out you can just stitch together cuts and that's it. But when they did this, it was interesting. Like David Leitch was saying that no one really believed in it because they were like the pacing is so hard to get right. Like even with the hidden cuts, like it's so risky. And he was like, we're gonna do it. And I do still think it's one of the best examples of like one of those stitched together, digitally stitched together, but still like one shot action scenes because it works narratively. And that's like
yeah.
I said it before. Like Spyglass is a real character in this film. They had this element of like having the family there, with the son and trying to get them out as well. Eddie Marsan is so empathetic, doing so much with so little. I think those stakes end up making that sequence even more memorable because then you have the intensity you were talking about, this like
Yeah.
breaking down of the body and spirit at the end for Lorraine. But it's it's a cool scene. I will not lie. It's effective. I like it. I wish
I
more of
think
the movie was like that. To be honest, like going more for this
well,
grittiness.
right. This is where I also think this is a genius part of this. This also comes at a point in time where social media is starting to change. And I think that when you get sort of pickpocketed of sequences where things are ripped for like 3 minutes and then put online, or
Hmm.
like 15 seconds, like TikTok brain rot comes in. And I think a lot of people then start to craft sequences where the devise of just that. So there's like small little bit of sequences everywhere and not actual set pieces. And I think not to, again, not to go back to anyone to the Lord and Saviors of the Wachowskis, but when you watch something like the Mona Lisa Overdrive on the freeway, that's like 45 minutes of a sequence.
It's a chunky one.
The
Yep.
thing about yeah, a chunky one, yeah, it's been said before. But I've heard it somewhere. But the thing about this is that this doesn't come before and it doesn't come afterwards.
Mhm.
It's a separated piece within a feature that sort of bridges two little gaps. And I've always appreciated that because there's not little snippets throughout. I don't want the anticipation of build up. I just want it there. I just want to be surprised by it. I think if the director is subliminally trying to posture these in and know what we're building up to, I think for 80-75% of an audience won't do. But I think a lot of people who are somewhat well aware of what this filmmaker is about and what we're going to see, I think you can identify that. And to me, it becomes like a drawback because then I'm waiting for the inevitable to happen. I'm waiting for you to try to blow my mind. And the fact that you're trying to do that to me is going to annoy me because I want to see this. I want to see this idea come to fruition. I don't want to see small little snippets of you trying to. I think Matthew Vaughn suffers from this. Matthew Vaughn will craft small snippets in his features and then trying to impress you with it and then not try to create a larger piece. Argyle is
That's
a
a
prime
good
example.
point, actually.
Yeah.
That's a good
Argyle
point.
is a prime example, but the Kingsman is also an issue of this. And I think that's where the difference between a James Bond film comes from now and where that's prospered and other clones of it. They've tried to replicate the sequence itself, but not find the formula of how it works as a whole. I think this finds really good balance of action, action, character, action, character. Then we're going to have a spectacle here, and we're not going to be too long. We're not going to be 40 minutes, but we're going to make it work in a long take because we're going to excruciate the audience because there's a character there who needs to survive who's dying, and there's another character there who knows if she gets caught here, everything is up, and there's more at stake there
You're
than we
right. The guy is
realize.
bleeding. You're seeing him
Yeah,
get like
there's an
paler and paler.
anticipation there. Yeah, there's a reason why that's drawn out. There's a reason why I think subliminally, but again consciously, that's why that has to be there. I
Hmm.
think that to me is where a director not necessarily trying to again. There's a bit there where it's trying to impress the audience, but it works directly with the form and the content perfectly, and those two attributes work swimmingly. When they don't, I think identified becomes so obvious. Whereas here, I think it works really well, and
Yeah.
the fact that he doesn't then try one up it. Whereas I think a lot of John Wick stuff does, but I think Fast and Furious formula is you have to up the next scenario, and that's sort of a doomed type of lineage there, because once that fails, you are fucked, because you plateau, and then you can only be good as the last bit. And it's happened to the Fast and Furious movies. I think at times it happened to Bond as well. But I think here, within the context of the actual feature, where there's always in action, there's always three beats: small spectacle, medium spectacle, the big thing. And Marvel is atrocious at it. And a lot of films fail to deter from that, where you get the big CGI video game monster at the end. Wonder Woman, Thor, they're all pronounced from it. This is a film that, again, it's not within that context of genre, but it doesn't. You have the big bad at the finale, but it's human beings against human beings, and it's very much like the first John Wick, where I think Chad Stahelski was like, we couldn't have that sequence going for 20 minutes. It's Baba Yaga versus a gangster, but we had to draw John Wick down, and then he could still get the job done, but we had to claw him down, we had to strip him away. I think this is very similar here, that when we get to the eventual ending, we know that nothing's going to stop her. But I think that the fact that we have to break her down so much to get there showcases of how strong she is as an asset to begin with, how much she's I think physically, mentally, psychologically. I think it's a great little attribute. Yeah, I think it works really well.
It's a neat sequence. And I want to say, like, a nice trivia, because the commentary was recorded before anything else happened. Like before the movie was released. Sorry. They were saying that Sam Hargrave, one of the stunt coordinators on the movie, also one of the performers, he was the camera operator of that scene. And in the commentary, David Leitch said, "I think one day he will make a great director." And what did he end up directing? He directed Extraction 1 and 2 that have very long, handheld, stitched together action scenes, which are cool. They are impressive, but like you said, kind of like they exist just for the sake of existing. They don't have much of a narrative reason. I mean, they build there like, oh, we need the narrative reason for an action scene that looks like this. We build everything around it. It doesn't come out organically. While in Atomic Blonde, it actually comes out organically. So that's one of the things I will definitely say is a plus for me in this film.
Not to go down a rabbit hole, but I think Sam Hargrave probably gets it right more often than not with those two films.
They are cool
I think he chooses
sequences.
his moments.
Yeah.
There
was like a new movie. I don't know if you watched it, that just came out. They Will Kill You, with Zazie Beetz.
Oh no, on Netflix.
No, it was in cinemas, but it will probably.
Oh, is it Zazie Beetz?
Yeah.
Right. No. But go on.
That one has like a long take action scene that the second it starts, I was like, oh, this does not make sense. I bet this is going to be a long take action scene. And it happens. I was like, why are you doing this? It's so choppy. It doesn't have real rhythm. It feels like, oh, we can just have digital cameras to help us stitch together those shots to make it a long take. It's like, yeah, but it's not well done. It's not justified by the story. It's not well done. I do think definitely Sam Hargrave learned a lot working with Leitch and Stahelski as well to prepare for his role as a director. Yeah, sorry.
I mean, the prison sequence in the second one works quite well. I mean, I can't particularly remember where it's the car chase sequence, isn't it?
Yeah, from the balcony to the car, all over. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's difficult when you're a director. God, I can't believe I'm saying this in front of you, but you would speak more than this for me. But I think to be in that type of genre in an extremely saturated market now, bar this and horror, God, everything's like the action genre or horror, and even when you go to like the B tiers, like there's so much of it now, Frank Grillo and all sorts, and then you go to horror anyway.
Yeah,
I think you've got to have a moment to really project one's sensibility and style. And I think more often than not, I think it falls into the category of please look at me, please look at me, please look at me, rather than let's do the sequence and let it speak for itself. And I think the two things blur quite easily. And I think Sam Hargreaves is first in the I can't remember what the name is now.
What?
but the one with Chris Hemsworth, what's it called?
Extraction.
Yes,
Yeah.
that might speak volumes on where I'm going with this. But I think in the first film, I think you can get away with it as it being, I can do this, and I think the film in itself works really well as like this very difficult type of story about a guy who's just lost and then gets a little bit of purpose. I think it works, and then you get to the second one. I know this is where you can correlate with Atomic Blonde. Is that why is he doing that in the second one? Beg the question. Is that to demonstrate that he can achieve it, or demonstrate because I can do this? Is it? I say that again. Sorry. Do you think it's because he's saying I can do this, or is
Mhm.
like, look how good this is. Look how we can integrate this. I think it's more sort of a flex than it is like you said, integrated piece of the actual cinematic experience. It works, but it'll never be as good as the first time he did it
Nope.
because he was a different person then.
And you
Where
weren't
he wanted
expecting it.
Yes. And I think there's a preconceived notion of where that speaks then for the director, because why then put that in the second film as your action set piece? It feels like that's been purposely made to be like, yeah, look at this, and we can just not the ingenuity of it. And I
Hmm.
think Atomic Blonde sort of circumvents that in a way. I mean, where you would be able to put that anywhere else in this film as well, I think you'd probably struggle. I think there's a few pieces here and there, but I think how it works just there and then is very much not a flex, but a really great piece. Again, not to reiterate, but to put it within the material and let that work then with the material and not against. I think a lot of people will look at that and be like, yeah, we can do this, and a lot of ingenuity goes into it, and it doesn't really add anything. It's a bit of a flex, and to be like you said, because you know it's coming and you can see it off a mile away, it's sort of like more so limiting.
Hmm.
Do you find as well? Like
Yeah.
it's like, I mean, you'll find that as a filmmaker, but as an audience member, I think it comes off a mile away where it's like, look at me, look at me, look at me. But I
Oh
think
yeah. Oh
that's
yeah.
all well and good, but I think you need to have a substance, have a sustenance to it, should I say? And I think here, I think it's a good job. I think there's on many occasions where it's like we've done this because we want to shout and scream, and not necessarily for the attributes of let's make something like a little bit of ingenious, like Victoria. Nobody, nobody can touch that because
Also
there's an
set in
ingenuity
Berlin, by
there.
the way. German film
Yeah,
also
yeah,
set in Berlin. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, there's an ingenuity there of like and balls. And again, I don't want to say that derogatory, but I think there's like a really great bit of stamina there. It's like they have achieved that because every single day before they started, that's what they wanted to achieve, and they wanted the material to speak for itself, and that it's ingenious, but also that it works within the narrative, and
Yeah.
those two things correlate. Again, work really well. If you can find the balance, you'll prosper. If not, I think one of them tanks the other. I think one of them wants to drown the other. I think
Yeah.
on many cases in this market, you're going to fall for that.
Sadly, yeah. And to kind of like start drawing things to a close, I will say complete compliments to David Leitch. He really did the best he could with a small budget because this movie doesn't feel as cheap. I want to say it was $20 million budget. It's the same one as the second John Wick film. Doesn't
That's
really feel like
crazy.
that. And hearing him in the commentary, they reuse so many of the same all like back streets of Budapest to be like those are 5 different courtyards technically, but actually it's the same one because we don't have the money. Oh, this scene we just shot because we had time, and I was like, let's just try and get it, and maybe we will use it later on in the edit, and they did. And there's so many little moments where I might have problems with his style occasionally. I do think he goes too much for, in a way that Zack Snyder gets a lot of flack. I think he's not much better than him in that sense of like going for cool just for the sake of cool, not really for narrative reasons sometimes. But he
Yeah.
manages to get the job done. He manages, and this was essentially like his second directorial film, but technically his first one as a solo director. And he showed he could also direct Academy Award winners, Academy Award nominees, get them to deliver fun performances, get them to be committed. Have Charlize Theron like go for it, the whole movie. Have everyone go for it, honestly. And yeah, I'm curious if you have, Jack, one favorite scene from the movie that really stands out to you. If you want, I can go first. Maybe it gives you time, or do you have one
No,
already?
mine's an obvious one, but I'm be interested to see what yours. We're gonna try not choose the obvious one.
We'll see. Go for it then.
Go on, you go first.
We talked about the cerebral fight and everything, blah blah blah. But I was really impressed on a rewatch, the Stalker fight scene, going to the Kino
Oh,
International, which is one of the few scenes they actually shot in Berlin and not Budapest. A cinema that's iconic in Berlin. I've actually been there for Berlinale a few times. They ended up renovating it. It's open again now. I really want to go there next time I'm in the city. But that sequence was really cool. Again, sake of cool, they were like, yeah, they're just showing Stalker in the cinema because that's what they were screening in Berlin at the time. Fine. It's a nice sequence, the backlighting in the cinema. Daniel Bernhardt, she uses a keychain to fight. Again, that was apparently like a cheap solution because they didn't have money for other things. And just stabs him in the cheek. It's the first moment in the film where you see that she's not invincible and invulnerable. She can get beaten up. She's not able to kill every single man that crosses her path. Again, slightly inconsistent. She just fought off like a dozen police officers, but it's fine. Um, but it's a it's a very nice sequence, and I think it's a nice setup for then the stairwell fight because that's when those same people, it's when the Russians come, and those are the true obstacles in her path to succeed. So I'm curious, which is your favorite scene, actually?
I've always quite liked the where it's the God, what's the song now? It's towards the ending where things start really heating up, and Percival knows that it's over, and Charlize Theron is after him when it's playing. Oh God, what's the song now? Red Balloons. No, is it Red Balloons?
Oh, like the cover, 1999
Yes,
Balloons, yeah. 99
Luftballon. I've
balloons.
always really liked that. I like how gritty it is. I like to know that that character knows he's over and done with. When they have a little bit of the fight and the song plays in the background when the wall is falling. I think it's very difficult to go past that one take, but I've always really enjoyed that. I just really like the background noise. I've always
Hmm.
really liked I think James McAvoy is really good here as well. He's
Yeah.
such a bastard, like a horrible shit,
It's like a
skinhead.
continuation of Filth almost.
Yeah, he is. He's horrible in this. Yeah, the broken hand. He's insipid, um, and just the realization, knowing that it's over, knowing that he thought for one moment. I think for 25 minutes of his day, he probably had it over, knowing that he was going to succeed and he could win it all. I just love that. I love that comeuppance there. So I choose that. I like Love's Balloon, the cover of that song as well, and she gets to him really good with the Porsche as well when his tires are being slashed as well.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
yeah.
like that. That's my favorite scene.
Everything, everything with
I
James
like
McAvoy is amazing in this film, honestly.
I like the opening with Blue Monday as well. I love that to just like it was perfectly like made for me where you're going to engross me totally. 1980s Berlin Cold War, David Leitch, John Wick vibes, Charlize Theron, and then again it brings me with Blue Monday, and that's the beginning of like this question mark to what's about to unfold. Perfect.
You were happy. You were happy.
It was good. 2017 was good for a few films. Well,
Then I have one last question now, which I thought it was going to be harder when we started this conversation, but I think now it's actually easier. Jack, after this conversation, talking about the coldest city and Atomic Blonde, which version do you prefer? Do you prefer the graphic novel or do you prefer the film?
I think I've come back with the term of chalk and cheese. I think if you're looking
Mm,
for the Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, if you're looking for the spy out from the cold or in from the cold, so I think you'd. I think it all. I think it would depend on what I'm wanting to get from the material. I think they're both very different for two very different audiences, but the adaptation works both ways for the type of thematic and tone they're going for. I would watch the film more than I would read the graphic novel again. I think the graphic novel is
yeah.
very much what you see is what you get, and that's it.
Hmm.
And I think rewatchability or rereadability. I don't necessarily think the comic book or the graphic novel really gives you much there. I think it very much does its job, and that's it. I will go back for the prequel. I think we both spoke about this as well. I think it'd be interesting to see what layers that provides if it's her story as well. I think it should be. It'd be interesting. I hope it's not about Percival or anything like that. That would just not that would be interesting, but the narrative in the graphic novel is just a misogynist old pig Whereas
Yes.
the film, I could spend another 2 or 3 hours with James McAvoy to see what he's been getting up with, because that's someone who is in the midst of the shit and he's enjoying it because he's getting away with murder. And I think there's an interesting watching that character. But I would go the film. The vibes are totally different, but I think the adaptation in itself, I think if you said on paper we're going to make a 1980s, late 1980s Cold War, bright neon lights, we're going to sort of be counterintuitive to the idea of the slow burning spy, and we're going to give it a little bit more of a lick of pain. I think this is actually perfect of how it's adapted. I think what they set out to do and what they achieved is probably very much nigh on, bang on. I mean, the fact this made money and it only cost 20 million. I'm shocked that there's not been a second round to this, when I think after Furiosa as well,
Yeah.
I'd be slightly more concerned that people wouldn't want to go see this. But between 2017 and 2024, 25, before that Furiosa came out, I do feel like there's a big gap there to get this out, don't you? I feel like there's definitely a
There definitely must have been problems. But probably not a right story for it, because she did make, like,
well, yeah,
Charlize Theron did those old guard movies. They're not really good, but
yeah.
she's tried to keep her foot in the actions. She's well trained. She could probably still pull it off. But at this point,
Well,
I think it's
didn't
too
she flirt
late.
with fucking Doctor Strange at one point as well? It's like, where did that?
Oh,
What
she's in the
happened
end
there?
credit scene of a movie that will never happen. Yes.
Well, but I do think that I think she did 5 years in development with this, and I think from the Mad
It
Max
wasn't
being a
5 years,
major
actually. I want to say it
success.
was like only a couple of years, because I think it was
Oh wow!
acquired in 2015 at Cannes for the production. They shot it in 2016. Yeah.
But I do think that I think the success of her with she had like a revival with Furiosa, and between that period, there's probably an idea of like Furiosa never really happened. He didn't cast her. He went for a younger look.
Like when you say
You know,
Furiosa, you
so
mean
he's not.
Fury Road, just for because
Yeah,
she's
no, I'm not a
the
Furiosa. Yeah, but I
character
mean,
as Furiosa.
but I mean, when Furiosa hit and it bombed, I think that is probably a telltale sign of audiences. If it came out now, I think they'd be hesitant to green light this because of that, which is a shame because again, from Fury Road to Furiosa, there's a period there where you have the John Wick movies. I feel like it's screaming for this. I feel like it's
Yeah.
screaming for a route. But again, like you, I think me and you slightly different. I think it does bait for like a sequel, but as a one in one, I think it works really well anyway.
I also forgot she was in the Fast and Furious movies. I was looking at her filmography. I was like, oh yeah, she's in those
What was it?
movies.
What was the name in Fast and Furious? It showed what that bowl cut she had.
Cypher,
Jesus wept. Oh, she had a
iconic
fucking
character.
submarine with Gal Gadot in the last one. Whatever happened to that one?
I don't know. There's a new one that's coming out. I guess they've shot it. I don't know what's happening there. I don't.
No, they haven't. They haven't shot it yet. They haven't got writers.
Amazing, perfect. I don't think that we'll
Fast
ever see the
X
last one.
Part Two.
Fast X Part 2.
But what
Fast
about John
X and a
Cena?
half.
Yeah.
I did find, just a little side note, I managed to find the premise of The Coldest Winter. And someone wrote, it's a prequel beginning 80 years prior to The Coldest City, following David Percival taking center stage as a young up-and-coming MI6 agent looking to make his name in one of the most sought-after postings during the Cold War Berlin. He's tasked with spiriting and defecting Russian scientists out of the city and back to Britain during a severe winter storm. Apparently fans of the original graphic novel like this, so, I didn't find Percival from the book to be that
No.
interesting. But then again, maybe this could change my mind. I'm actually curious to read it now. I think you're also interested in maybe giving it a shot, right?
I am, but that really annoys me this because that's a character who is very much situated in that graphic novel to play a purpose, and those elements are to sort of go against what Charlize Theron's character, that character's called. I can't remember the fucking name. That's why I've always referred to that. But that character's other attributes, it's like two that go against one there. Whereas then retroactively giving him a bit of depth, the reason why he's like that is because of this. To me, it's sort of like just I don't know. I don't.
Yeah, it's
If it's not there on the page, it's not there. I mean,
Yeah,
out of all the characters there, does it really deserve 177 page?
graphic
And
novel.
not really. I mean, why wouldn't you just get more of?
I honestly think it's just a
Uh,
nice excuse to be in this world. Like, I have ideas for spy stories. Let's just go backwards and backwards. It was apparently supposed to be a trilogy. I was just reading up in the same article. but I don't think we'll ever see like a third and final Coldest, whatever.
How many pages is the prequel?
I want to say it's the same amount of pages,
Oh,
kind of. Yeah, it's like a
I'll
graphic
read it
novel.
tonight, but I'll be sending you messages about it. I'll be going to
I'll
sleep.
be on the lookout for that.
Look, it might, like you said, it might be interesting, but I just think that that's like, I don't know. I'm just trying to think of like an ensemble piece where it's like for example, would you watch a prequel from Spyglass, the film, or did you just get
No,
what you get in the film?
I'm fine
Yeah,
with the
it's like,
film.
yeah, I think James McAvoy's character in the film is a wrong 'un, and I like that idea that he's a proper wrong 'un.
And you want to see how he
He's
gets
just,
there, maybe, right? Was he more?
yeah,
Did the
because you
city
know he's a
corrupt him? Did he
bastard.
become addicted to
Yeah.
drugs there? It's like, I mean, it's Berlin after all.
Well, I wouldn't know.
Many such
I won't
cases,
know.
many such cases.
Stick to yourself.
Um,
Stick to yourself.
but for me, I will also agree with you. I will go with the film. I don't want to say I wasn't disappointed by the graphic novel. I did like this more than when we did the episode on a history of violence. I really didn't like the history of violence graphic novel. But I did really enjoy revisiting Atomic Blonde. I'd been meaning to do it for quite a few years, to be honest. And this was a perfect opportunity. And even listening to David Leitch talk about the film, even though I don't agree with his directorial choices sometimes, it was enlightening and it was fun. So I'm really glad we did this. But unfortunately, this is the end of this episode, this conversation about the Coldest City and Atomic Blonde. But Jack, thank you so much for joining me. Where can our listeners find your writing, your work, and your voice if they want to keep hearing you yap about the Wachowskis any chance you can?
Yeah, I mean, it's just go by the 4K Speed Racer.
Subliminal, not so subliminal messages.
Wasn't it good to see them two back in a room together, though? Wasn't it brilliant just to see them being interviewed together, the Wachowskis? A beautiful moment. Like,
I think that they will come. I think they will reunite. I hope so. Their forces.
I think that there's stuff to be worked out. I think Lily's got some stuff to work out, and I think Lana.
There's like a horror. Was Lana directing like a horror film based on a trans book of what's her name? There's like a film coming. I remember back when I was on Twitter. So I don't know anything more about film. I canceled Twitter. I don't know what's happening in the world.
No, I'm away from that. I think Lily's making like a drama, with a friend of hers, and I think Lana's got her fingers in a lot of stuff. Whatever.
Oh no, it
they're
was
doing,
Lily Wachowski. Sorry, not Lana.
Yeah, Lily Wachowski. Yeah, Lily Wachowski's making a drama with a friend because they did a TV show, didn't they? And I think they're going to make a film, not about the TV show, but something else. But I think Lana's flirting with Warner Brothers. I don't know. I'm like you. I'm not interested in that sort of aspect anymore. I think. Anyway, we'll move on from that because that's another. We have that.
That's another podcast for another day.
Yeah, I have a podcast thing with Carson every time. It's quite a sad state of affairs nowadays. But yeah, you can listen to me on Psycho episode. We did Cloud Atlas again, brilliant episode. Cloud Atlas, thanks to Nick, got me like really back into reading again.
Yeah,
I read about 35 books. I read like 11 Irving Welsh books last year. I'm trying to read Dracula at the moment, and I'm trying to read a bit of Bond as well, Ian Fleming, and again I'm going to read a few more graphic novels if I can get through to them. Absolute Batman I'm reading as well. If anyone's reading, that's really interesting comic book series from DC, and then I'm pretty sure there's like a Speed Racer comic book out there, and there's Universal Monsters stuff's come out as well that they're adapting, Dracula, Frankenstein, so on and so forth. Some good stuff within there, but you can find my voice on Clabbercast with Carson. We just talk stuff just on the Great Ziegfeld, which is just atrocious. We should listen to it because it was tormenting to watch. And then Uncut Gems, hopefully some more episodes there I'm going to be on. And you can read, I've got a review for Saipan coming out and a review for Peaky Blinders, The Immortal Man coming out as well. So things have been a bit shit at home, but just cracking on with it. And then hopefully Nick will invite me back for some more if you guys can deal with me for a few more hours. But this has been really fun. Really good, easy episode as well. Good, quick read. Good fun. The two mediums are really interesting to talk about. Another cracking episode.
Yeah.
I'll say this. Mick Herron, slow horses.
I'll give it. I'll watch it. I'll watch it. I promise you.
I'm there.
I'll start it.
I will be there. But anything else like this has been brilliant as well. And hopefully one day we'll be talking about Berserk with Keanu Reeves, won't we, as well?
I don't
Your
think that's
favourite.
gonna happen, but maybe we'll see. But he's working with Jonah Hill on nonsense, so I don't know.
Well, we don't, I block that sort of stuff out. I don't know what you're talking about.
Lies all around.
Well, there's some that I'm sure.
Yeah, so links to all of those things are in the show notes of the episode. Meanwhile, you can follow me everywhere at NikiGra97. You can follow the podcast on Instagram at Anatomy of Adaptation Pod. There you can stay up to date with any past and future episodes. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you have a lovely day, and we hope to hear from you soon. Goodbye.